These asshats hate everything in the Marvel Universe. So why in the would they do another movie review in one of our films? Let me let you in on a little secret. It's just to piss you fanboys off. All right, the Deadpool sequel. Nake, Jared and I saw it last night. Before we move on, I gave this one mugs up. You?
Mugs up.
So 2 mugs up for Deadpool 2. We'll get into why. We were actually going to be releasing a Change My Mind today on Israel Has a Right to Exist, Change My Mind, but we didn't do it. My producer vetoed it. Johnny Boy, why was that?
Because I didn't want you to die.
Yeah, he said he thought that there was a strong chance I could die. Instead, we saw Deadpool 2. I liked it. You liked it. There were some things not as good as the original. Full disclosure, I'm biased here. I know a lot of people weren't thrilled that I didn't like the last Avengers film. These are actually some comics. I have a bunch of I couldn't find them all, but I have shoeboxes full. Deadpool and Wolverine were my comics as a kid. What I love is when I go through these, by the way, you see some of the old ads. Look, an ad for Meteor Man. I think this is 93. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what series that is. Anyway, so I always loved Deadpool. I always loved Wolverine. That being said, I acknowledge that most of the X-Men films were terrible, with the exception of First Class. X-Men 2 was not bad, but X-Men 3 was so laughably bad that it was very hard for me to handle. And same with Wolverine. Logan was great. The other 2 were disappointing. So it's important to separate if you're a comic book fan versus does this stand alone as a film. I think it's actually pretty entertaining as a film, less so than the first one. There's a little more inside baseball, so if you're just going to see a film, you haven't seen the first one, you may not enjoy this one as much. I don't think it's as good as the first one overall. If you are a fan of the comics, of course, that adds another layer, and I do think you'll probably enjoy this one quite a bit. So what did you like about the film?
What I liked about it was, it's hard to set up some of my likes without setting up some of the things I didn't like, but I think overall, the character development I thought was good. Every character still had an arc that kind of continued and built on from the first one. A lot of sequels, that's one thing they really screw up, is they just botch the character development in the second one. Yeah. They just assume you know where this character is going and it doesn't really go anywhere. So I think it was a good character development. Overall, it wasn't an original story.
It's hard to do that too, by the way, with an anti-hero like Deadpool. A lot of people say, how do you continue this? Because in the comics, this is a guy who there really isn't the same kind of an arc. Yeah. No, I mean, he ends up being, depending on who you ask and depending on which series was being written by whom, it could be a very selfish character. It could be very grating for a general film-going audience. That wasn't the R rating, but that was why some studios had some trepidation about the film. So I do think that's good, and that's an important point. It's hard to do with a character like this. I think they did that pretty well.
And I think it is a comedy first, which I think is...
Yes.
I think that's one of the things that distinguishes some of the videos, some of the movies that I think worked as of recent. I think they approached Guardians of the Galaxy more as a comedy. Thor failed because they tried to do the same thing. It's just a crappy version of it. Thor, the Ragnarok.
Yeah. Well, I thought the first 2 Thors were embarrassing, and the third one was an embarrassing try to save the previous embarrassing. Yeah. No, I agree with you. This is a comedy first and foremost, wrapped in a superhero film. And for me, that's refreshing, and it's the only thing that works now at this point in the Marvel universe, because to me, again, I was a comic book kid, but it takes itself so damn seriously now, as though you're going to be following this. I mean, like it's War and Peace. You need to know everything that's been going on.
And if you're going to take yourself seriously, you better be a Logan.
Yeah, exactly. Better be really well done. Exactly. Yeah. Not in between. Squash, just like grape. You're still watching this? You must really love content, or your dad never hugged you enough, or your Boy Scout master hugged you too much. Either way, if you're still hanging around, might as well make yourself useful and mash your greasy basement home on the notification bell. So this is the only film that's able to make fun of how self-important the Marvel Universe has become. And they do that quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So I think it works in that aspect. But that also brings you to, I don't know if you have any more pros, that brings you to your main con.
A few cons. Nothing critical. Nothing super bad. But there is
It's entertaining.
It was entertaining.
For sure.
You can expect that. Con number 1, I thought there was a little bit of a lull after the first act when you kind of realized the hero is trying to find himself, and at the same time, they hadn't established the villain and what his it was about 15 minutes of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to care about right now because he doesn't care about anything, and I'm not really interested in the villain because I don't know what he's doing or what he's up to or why he's there.
Right.
It wasn't done in a way that built mystery or suspense.
I would disagree. I would say the third act was disappointing. I would say the second act, so Cable.
The third act was very predictable.
No, I'd say the third act is disappointing because here's a spoiler alert, really quickly. Just fast forward the next, I would say 30 seconds. Okay. In the second act, Cable shows up with Josh Brolin, 5'7", 52 years old, juiced to the gills.
He looks good for 52.
He looks good. He looks good. Give him
52 and a lot of money.
He may not be 52. He could be 48. Watch, we'll get sued. This will be demonetized because Josh Brolin made a call to Susan Wojcicki. So he showed up, and again, spoiler, he's the villain in the second act, and it's an interesting villain. Anyone who knows Cable knows time travel. Basically, put it this way: the first film, remember when he spells out his name with the dead bodies, was really funny because he's getting revenge, killing this guy. There's none of that in the third act.
That was a very satisfying part of the first.
Right. The final villain who gets killed is someone who's almost entirely. They don't really build a villain once they develop the character of Cable, where he's not really the villain. There's no one left.
Yeah, it's not very interesting.
And so it gets a little disappointing at the end, but it's redeemed by the fact that it's still very funny all the way through.
Which brings me to my second criticism was it's not an incredibly original storyline. So if you're looking for something that's totally off the wall original, I went back through.
That's any Marvel though.
No, but particularly the time travel, saving a young person before they do some grievous act. Looper, Back to the Future, same universe, X-Men Days of Future Past, trying to stop Mystique from doing something awful. Star Trek, the reboot, Men in Black 3. It's a very kind of it's become a movie trope, and it felt a little stale, and which lent itself to being very predictable at the end. You kind of knew where it was going.
Yeah, I guess I can kind of understand. That's the whole science fiction thing. You get into 12 Monkeys and that kind of deal. I mean, there's so many there's so many films that do it. This film certainly didn't do it the best, but that wasn't really the focus of the film. So, I think it comes down to this. The focus of the film, is it entertaining? Mm-hmm. Yes. One thing that they do really well is they don't try to go so big like the Avengers film or the Thor films where it just feels like you're in a video game.
Galactic scale of
it was not as
entire city demolished.
Right. It was not as good as the first film. It was entertaining. It looked good. It was funny. It was very funny. The acting was good.
One thing I would say about the funny. I think they would have benefited from a comedy writer. I went back through IMDb. Not a single writing credit on there has any comedy writing experience, and it showed a little bit where some of those jokes felt like something you've seen on Twitter 100 times.
Yeah, there were a little bit of that.
McRib gag and some other things. That's like I've heard that. It's kind of dad jokey.
Yes,
they would have benefited from somebody who was a little more experienced and polished with comedy writing to come up with something that.
It seemed like it relied a little bit more on the whole turning to the camera inside baseball, which was, again, comic book wise, was unique for Deadpool when the comic book came out. That was why there was all this buzz. Remember when Deadpool became its own series, he would always turn basically to you, the reader, instead of the camera. Kind of relied on that a little bit.
Do you think it was too self-aware in this one compared to the first?
That's a good question.
It's a hard line.
It's a tough balance
for them as writers. That is a hard line to kind of.
Here's something I will say, and this is again standalone film. It works. Mm-hmm. I think you'll enjoy it. It's a strong art. Less of a strong art than the first one, though, I would say.
Yeah.
I would certainly as far as
every bit as gory, but not as sexual.
The sexual, yeah,
and the language,
not as potty mouthy anyway. For parents who are wondering, I still wouldn't take your kids to it. But that's something with Deadpool. There was so much buzz when it started out because Deadpool is this anti-hero, and studios didn't want to do it. Gosling, all the Ryans. Oh. That being said, Reynolds doesn't take himself nearly as seriously as Gosling, a guy from Cornwall, Ontario, with a fake Brooklyn accent. Where'd you pick that one up?
Ryan's too many damn Chris's.
Yes. The first one was this. It was an underdog. It wasn't supposed to be created. Ryan Reynolds had something to prove.
Low budget, and they mocked it.
And they mocked
honestly,
it.
In the film.
They mocked it, right. So they mocked it, and they kind of went after Marvel and studios, and that was a big part of why it was funny. Well, what do you do when you're the underdog, and a big part of what makes the movie work is that you're mocking that, you're taking advantage of that, and now you're the biggest grossing R-rated film ever, I think, next to The Passion, domestically. I think they even referenced that in the film. What do you do at that point? I think there's a little bit of that in this film where they're kind of searching for an antagonist, and it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
When he's like, a good example is not really spoiler, but when he makes a joke about how why don't we have the budget for other X-Men in here. It was funny in the first one, but now you just know it's a lie because, of course, they're going to toss all budget at this film more than any other film, probably.
Sure. Yeah, they sunk their pennies into it. I think one last thing. Do you think it was too PC? Because I would argue I don't think it was PC, but I think the comedy and throughout the whole thing was very much tailored toward that Twitter social justice crowd who understand all the references, because the references only that crowd would understand.
It's, well, like check your cultural appropriation,
racist this, racist that.
That being said, I think you could argue it's tongue in cheek.
I think you could,
but it's even if it were tongue in cheek, where sort of Deadpool's insensitive, trying to act as always politically correct, it was done in a way. And that's another thing there's a little bit of edge loss in this one. It was done in a way that really walked that line.
Didn't really alienate anybody.
Right. Which it's almost not polarizing.
Which almost made it less.
Right. I mean, if anything, if someone's going to say something that should be on that line, right? We've talked about this with comedy. But if you're going to deal in the Marvel universe, if someone's going to be breaking that wall, if someone's going to be going way past, it should be Deadpool. Mm-hmm. It never happens. So it's funny, it's entertaining, but I would say relatively safe. Compared to the first one. Yeah. Yep. But still, 2 mugs up. If you're looking for something entertaining,
last night's
certainly better than Avengers Age of, what was the last one?
Infinity Wars.
Infinity Wars. So what is it? Avengers Age of Crap.
Age of Crap.
And then it's just the never-ending.
Infinity Crap.
Never-ending.
I actually kind of liked it.
Pedestrian content wars. Hey there, YouTube viewer. If you like this video, you first off should probably seek counseling, but you should subscribe or hit the notification bell or watch one of these videos that's playing. The truth is, I don't know what any of that means anymore. If you try and subscribe or hit the notification bell, you won't be notified. And if you try and click one of these videos, it's just going to take you to BuzzFeed Boldly Fat Broads as they get carried out of their houses where they had to break down the north wall and they get carried out in a land whale tarp. I don't know what's happening on YouTube. I know what's happening with Mug Club, louderwithcreditor.com/Mug Club. You get to watch the daily show 1 hour every single day, not just clips, along with like 15 other shows for $69 annually if you're a student or veteran or military, and you get to keep us here on YouTube for free because we can irritate them by your support. It's worth it, right?